This talk tonight is part of a 4-week series. I began last week with love, loving kindness, loving presence. The four together are sometimes described as the divine abodes. And they are love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So tonight is about compassion. And it's really the inquiry that a lot of us have. You know, what helps us to awaken our heart? What helps to cultivate a compassionate heart? And part of what I'm finding really interesting is that in the last maybe 5 years, that inquiry has moved from the, just the spiritual and religious communities into the larger culture in a very active and immediate way. It's become a real secular kind of inquiry. And I'm aware of it I have many friends that are involved with conflict resolution, with mediation, how alive it is there, on how the criticalness of having this capacity for empathy and compassion. And of course, it's in so much communications, nonviolent communications, in education and psychotherapy, as you know. I mean, in psychotherapy, if you look at what's really going on with ourselves and the world, there's no healing. There's no healing without this capacity to soften and widen a heart, make it more inclusive. I sometimes think of that, there's a Gary Larson cartoon, and there's two women that are hiding behind a locked door, and they're kind of peering out through a window, and one of them is saying to the other, "Calm down, Edna. Yes, it is a giant, hideous insect, but it might be a giant, hideous insect in need of help," And there's some sense that, if we can see past the initial presentation of ourselves, of each other, and get that whenever somebody is behaving in a way that doesn't appeal to us, it usually has to do with an unmet need, that there's some cry for help. So we're seeing, as I mentioned, in the secular world, there's research labs at tons and tons of major institutions. I'm thinking right now of Harvard and University of Wisconsin, and at Stanford, I'll give you an example. There's a research lab there, but there's also, here's a course that they offer. Stanford's Compassion Training Class is a 9-week course designed to develop the qualities of compassion, empathy, and kindness for oneself and for others. CTC integrates traditional contemplative practices with contemporary psychology and scientific research on compassion. It's 2 locations, Stanford University and UC Berkeley. How many of you want to attend that? Yeah, sounds good, yeah. But it's in the culture. You can feel it. And of course, the word compassion has been, it can be a messy word. It's in the political parlance. And sometimes with fear-based politics, compassion is equated with something, soft or naive. But in a way, when we look at real leadership, that the nature of it is a compassionate heart. And probably a good number of you in some way either listened to Vice President Biden or read about his talk that was right before Memorial Day. And he gave it to a group of military people that were grieving for lost ones. And when he gave it, he spoke of his own grief, and he has had huge loss. His first wife and his daughter were killed in an automobile accident when he was 30 years old. And in this talk, he described how he considered suicide. He was devastated, he considered suicide. And I was thinking about how I think there's like 8 million people a year in this country that seriously consider suicide, probably more. And the kind of empathy and feeling of, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this, that the Vice President of the United States considered suicide. It just hit me, that And this is I want to just read you a sentence or two. He said, "There will come a day, I promise you, when the thought of your son or daughter, of your husband or wife brings a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eye. It will happen." Now, he can speak from that place. He really knows it from the inside, that there is a thing that happens with time, that there's still a sorrow, but we're able to sense the love and the sweetness too in a very immediate way. So this is a speech that came from empathy. I think it's really a mark of a leader. So we know from research that the same neural circuitry that allows us to be kind towards ourselves and present to our own body and heart are what allow us to be that way with others. We can't separate how we relate to our inner life to how we relate to others. And what I'll speak a little more about, that when we talk about developing compassion, we're talking about, on the ground level, compassion for the life that's right here. Same parts of the brain, same parts of the brain. So I wanted to really start with this flavor of the larger culture, because my sense is that when we consciously set out to cultivate compassion, we're part of a kind of evolutionary unfolding of consciousness. It's like we have this capacity in our brain. It's there. It was there in order initially to help us with child rearing and with bonding with our immediate family, but it has the capacity to widen and widen and widen to be all-inclusive. These mirror neurons and the circuitry to really feel how others are feeling. We have this capacity. And the fact that we then take on a practice to cultivate it, that we have the mindfulness and consciousness to say, I want to cultivate this, that we bring our energy and intelligence to waking it up, is what furthers our human evolution. That this evolution of consciousness comes because of that. Now, tonight, and when I speak about this in general, the key to it really is our intention. That there's a lot of conditioning in our body and our nervous system that keeps us from manifesting compassion. And so it takes practice. It takes intentionality. It's part in the Buddhist tradition, the image of the bodhisattva, as the awakened being, is really an expression of a being that has recognized how much it matters to fulfill what we can be, to be who we can be, and is committed to compassion. And every one of us has that possibility. So just to look for a little bit about what blocks compassion, because really that's our starting place, is this honest recognition that, well, how many moments do we spend in our day where there's an active sense of being touched, very tenderly touched by the plight of ourselves or others, and a movement to respond. Because compassion is both. Compassion is both that sense of that empathy or tenderness of feeling really the pain of suffering, and it's a reaching out to help. It's got that inclination. I mean, the part of the brain that's involved with the compassion response includes the motor cortex, action. So we look and say, well, how many moments of the day was that circuitry alive for me? Was my heart feeling that tenderness, that resonance? And what we start discovering is that when we're in the grip of stress, and by stress I mean when we're in some form of fight-flight, when we're feeling our lives as time-pressured, that we're having to do more to be okay, if there's a sense of failure, if we feel misunderstood, if we feel rejected, if there's pressure like that, if there's stress, then what happens is our biochemistry is in fight-flight. And rather than the parts of the brain that really get activated with compassion, our limbic system is dominating. And we're somewhat cut off from compassion and empathy. So we can see it in an obvious way. I mean, this is not, high science. We can see, let's say you're in traffic and you have an appointment, right? Okay? Well, one friend of mine describes it perfectly. When we're in traffic, everybody else is traffic. We don't think we're the traffic, It's like everybody else is traffic. But there's this self-other thing, and the self feels kind of small, kind of separate, either oppressed or victimized or aggressive or whatever, but there's a complaint, and there's not that open-hearted quality that goes with compassion. We can see it in the moments that we're anxious about an upcoming event or about performing well. It's very hard to pay attention to the people we're with and really be there, like be in that receptive place where we can actually tune in and sense, okay, this person has an unmet need, there's something going on. We don't pay attention. We can see it in the moments that we feel criticized, how much we close up. Stress shuts us down, it disconnects us. And then, of course, in our social institutions, our schools and our businesses, because there's a stress of performing, because we have an economy that's asking that we continually produce more, we're having to go faster and faster and do more and more, that does not make a conducive atmosphere to looking at each other and seeing who's there and being loving and being compassionate. Instead of that, here we are together feeling, there's usually a pecking order, a hierarchy that appears. There's cliques and there's a pecking order. And what we find is that many people we categorize as below us or above us. And I just invite you to kind of look, because there's some sense of who has more power, who needs more from the other. There's a kind of an imbalance thing. And it's very hard to register when we have somebody above us or below us, their realness and what they're living with. Somebody sent me recently this story. The Pope had just finished a tour of the East Coast and was taking a limousine to the airport. Having never driven a limo, he asked the chauffeur if he could drive for a while. Well, the chauffeur didn't have much of a choice, so he climbs in the back of the limo and the Pope takes the wheel. Okay, so the Pope's approaching Highway 95 and he starts accelerating to see what kind of power this limo has, And suddenly he sees the blue lights of a state patrolman in the mirror. So he pulls over, the trooper comes to the window, and the trooper sees who it is and says, just a moment, sir, I need to call in. So he's, calling in, and he's pretty shaken. He's talking to the chief. He says to the chief, he's got a really, really important person pulled over, and how do I handle this? It's not Ted Kennedy again, as it replies the chief. No, sir, replied the trooper. This guy's more important. Is it the governor? More important than that, replies the trooper. Is it the president? Replied the chief. No, even more important, replies the trooper. Well, who in the heck is it, screams the chief. I don't know, sir, replies the trooper, but he's got the Pope as his chauffeur. I was looking for something that showed hierarchy. It was the best I could find. Okay, so let's check this one out in our own lives. Let me ask you to just close your eyes for a moment. And for this particular reflection, first, as we often do, just take a moment to get here. In other words, just sense, here I am, this body, this aliveness. this breath. So try now to bring to mind somebody you want something from. You know, you want either approval or money or help, security, maybe a job promotion. There's somebody that in some way has something that you want. Most of us have somebody we want approval from that we really respect. And just notice how this person appears in your mind. I mean, do you focus on a particular visual image or maybe a conversation or a mood? So what's your way of just landing on this person in your mind? What do you notice about this person? Take a moment to imagine now some parts or some particulars of this person's life. Just imagine what she or he loves. Imagine how this person might fear falling short. What brings delight? What might make this person anxious? See if you can imagine how this person might be touched by kindness. Or hurt by criticism. And just pausing again. Just ask yourself whether anything shifted in your perspective. Has this object of something you really wanted, or perhaps some fear, or some difference, shifted some? Is this person more human? More real. Okay, so opening your eyes. For most of us, because we have stereotypes and because we don't always really notice what's going on for others, and because we operate off our wants and fears a lot of the time, cultivating compassion is this conscious decision to deepen attention. We have to look more closely. Now, sometimes, because what we're really doing, we're widening the space of heart and presence to really include another, to not have that other in the kind of unreal other category. Now, it's easiest to begin to sense into who's there when we, in some way, share something. We have a similar way that we suffer. That makes it easier. I had dinner with a friend a few nights ago, and her dad's dying. And they had a very, very close relationship. She's in deep mourning. And anything that she hears about, anybody else that's having a loss, she's so right there. We talked about the community of loss. How many of us know what that's like to have that kind of bottomless grief where it just feels like we've lost a part of ourselves? So it's easier when we have that kind of a link. It's easier if we've know what it's like to lose a job or feel ashamed or feel really discouraged that we can't find our niche. When we run into someone else like that, it's like our heart can open to it if we've been present with it in ourselves. That's the key. You have to have been present with it within your own being. We know what it's like if somebody struggled with an addiction. These 12-step groups are wonderful because there's so much compassion there, because so many people know what it's like to suffer in that way. The part of the healing is being held in that field of compassion. And then, of course, for many of us that have struggled with illness, just to feel at the mercy of your body or at the mercy of the medical system. I was talking about this to one person, and this is what she sent me. This is an email. A woman brought in a very limp duck into a veterinary surgeon. As she laid her pet on the table, the vet pulled out his stethoscope and listened to the bird's chest. After a moment or two, the vet shook his head and sadly said, "I'm sorry, your duck Cuddles has passed away." The distressed woman wailed, "Are you sure?" "Yes, I am sure. Your duck is dead," replied the vet. "How can you be so sure?" she protested. "I mean, you haven't done any testing on him or anything. He might just be in a coma or something." The vet rolled his eyes, turned around, and left the room. He returned a few minutes later with a black Labrador retriever. As the duck's owner looked on in amazement, the dog stood on his hind legs, put his front paws on the examination table, and sniffed the duck from top to bottom. He then looked up at the vet with sad eyes and shook his head. The vet patted the dog and then took it out of the room. A few minutes later, he returned with a cat. The cat jumped on the table and also delicately sniffed the bird from head to toe, head to foot. The cat sat back on its haunches, shook its head, and meowed softly and strolled out of the room. The vet looked at the woman and said, "I'm sorry, but as I said, this is most definitely 100% certifiably a dead duck." The vet turned to his computer terminal, hit a few keys, and produced a bill, which he handed to the woman. The duck's owner, in shock, took the bill. $150, she cried, $150 to tell me my duck is dead? The vet shrugged. "I'm sorry. If you had just taken my word for it, the bill would have been $20. But with the lab report and the CAT scan, it's now $150. Some of you are thinking these are getting worse and worse, I know. Scratching bottom here. So, our entry to compassion, we have to deepen attention regardless of the situation, because we're usually in fight-flight. It's easier when someone has something that we have been through. But in a deeper way, when we can slow down and register the basic realness of someone, that this is a sentient being. It's like the Dalai Lama says, everyone wants to be happy. Nobody wants to suffer. And that includes all beings. All beings. There's a touching Sikh story that I've always loved, where an aged spiritual master calls just two of his most devoted disciples in front of his hut, and he gravely gives one a chicken, and he instructs each one a chicken. He instructs them, "Go to where no one can see and kill the chicken." One of the men immediately goes behind his shed, picks the axe, and chops off the chicken's head. The other one wanders around for hours and finally returns to his master, the chicken still alive in his hand. "Well, what happened?" the teacher asked. The disciple responds, "I can't find a place to kill the chicken where no one can see me. Everywhere I go, the chicken sees." It takes slowing down and getting quiet to perceive the sentience, the consciousness, the awakeness, the beingness that lives through all creatures. If we really do that, we can't cause harm. We feel that we're part of each other. There's a reflection that I often do. Again, you might just for a moment close your eyes. This is similar to what you just did a moment ago. But this time, just pick a person that you know well. A person you know well and that you like. And just be aware of what comes to mind when you bring them into your awareness. Again, whether you have an image, a visual image, whether you're reviewing a time you've been with this person, a particular event, whatever you know about them, just whatever comes to mind that you know about this person. And then take a moment to shift your attention and just be aware of the present moment, what's right here. Be aware of whatever you're experiencing, feelings in your body, sounds. And be aware of your own presence, that which is aware. Just this knowing quality. And consider that the person you were just reflecting on is more like this sentience, this experiencing, this subjectivity. That's more the truth of who that person is than any image or idea we might carry about them. Same sentience. It's basic aliveness, awareness. And added onto that, a lot of shared DNA, the basic equipment of 5 emotions: fear, happiness, sadness, anger, disgust. The same pain at failure, same insecurity of just being alive. It says, George Washington Carver says, how far you go in life depends on your being tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and the strong, because someday you will have been all of these. Okay, so please open your eyes.